all part of the human experience now.
GOP's negotiator with the
Nobody
We have Reverend Williams.
everybody was perfect where we came from.
50% minimum
Some of us
Mhm.
got sold,
Yeah.
some of us were kidnapped. So ain't nothing been right. So now we must get this right. We have to make this right. Reverend
But here's the
Williams.
thing we have to be aware of.
Well, that's
Yes.
fine.
Morning.
That's a hard thing. Reverend Williams, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are
It
you?
is great hearing your voice. I just got back from Tulsa
Ah,
yesterday.
how was that experience for
Oh,
you?
whoa. I mean, it was a lot. I can't wait to get back.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
cannot
Yes.
wait to get back. There's a lot to it.
Mhm. Yeah. And you got to meet President Biden as well, huh?
Well, I met him before. Dad ran
You
against
met
him
him
in
before.
1988. So we've,
Right.
we've, when he sees me, Santita, that sort of thing. And plus my brother, so it was good to see him. It was good to see him. It was good to see him.
Mhm.
It was just, it was good to see him. It was good to see him. And, it was interesting
It
to
was
see
good
who
that
he
he was
brought.
there.
Oh, yeah, he's the first president in
Mhm.
100 years to be there. Hey, everybody, I am
Right.
back. Hey, Michael and yeah, oh, you're so sweet, Michael. Hey, Raphael. Hey, Big Bree, 65. I missed you too, my sweet. Shirley from Philadelphia, good morning. Tanya, Barbara Jean, hey. Linda, how are you all? We're going to be talking about Tulsa today, and I'm going to be talking about Tulsa as we go forward. Because when we look at reparations, when we look at the discussion about restoring people, and this is for when you watch the indigenous people getting almost half of Oklahoma back. We've never respected any treaty we've made with the indigenous peoples of the United States. When you talk about getting America right, it's a spiritual issue, everybody. Black Americans want what was taken from us. Reparations were built into the end of slavery. That's where the 40 acres and a mule came from. That was built in. That was baked into the cake. And so we came out of slavery building these very prosperous communities. You got a lot of Tulsas. And these people will run out of their prosperous towns, their prosperous farms. We're northern refugees. We're refugees in California. Black people naturally are Southerners. That's who we are. I'm not saying we can't go other places, but that's where we're from. So we're going to talk about that today. Not just reparations, but restitution. Give me my stuff back. Because all those people, because that part of Tulsa now is becoming gentrified. And most black people in Tulsa, the overwhelming majority of black people are poor. They're working class. They can't afford to live in Greenwood anymore because it's becoming gentrified. So we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk with Commissioner Rodney Ellis from Texas about these voting laws that we need to pay attention to. They are being rolled out all over the country. While we're looking at all these other things, you must pay attention to that because 2022 is upon us, everybody. Raphael Warnock, as much as we celebrated his win in Georgia, he is up for re-election, his first full election for his first full term in a little more than a year, next year. So we got to talk about that today. So, and of course, we're going to get good news from Reverend Williams. Hey. And so I'm going to let, hey, Chaparral, what's going on? And Marty and Meddy. I'm going to let you all go.
Have
We're
a
going to be
great
up.
show.
Thank you so much. We're going to be up in a couple of minutes. So thank you all so
Okay.
much.
All right.
Thank you. Yay.
Good to hear from you, Reverend, and also Santita. Miss you guys.
Oh, well, we are back. We are here.
1 minute.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to let you go. Okay.
All righty.
Thank
Have
you.
a good show.
Thank you, sweetie.
I think it's a given. The Tom Hartman Radio Program, weekdays 11 a.m. to 2 p.m.
So we've let them go, yes?
The Executive
Yes.
Okay,
of
great.
ESC is a nonprofit organization with the mission to help make other nonprofits successful since 1978. They provide
30.
consulting, coaching, and professional services to over 150 nonprofit organizations, helping 1.2 million people each year. They'll facilitate board retreats, provide high-level mentoring, manage volunteer efforts, whatever you need to make your nonprofit successful. To join ESC or get ESC's help with your mission, visit execservicecorps.org. That's execservicecorps.org.
5.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. I'm back from Tulsa. Can't wait to talk with you about that today. It's a joy to be with you today. I am Santita Jackson. This is the Santita Jackson Show coming to you from WCPT 820 in Chicago, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and AM 950 radio. The voice of progressive Minnesota. Oh boy, call me or text me at 773 WCPT, 773 GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text me. I want to hear from you, though. I want to hear your voices. I've missed you too, Michael Ann and Raphael and Big Bree 65 and Shirley from Philadelphia and Linear Bob from San Jose. And Melissa, hey, all my people. Joyce, what's going on? Will and Andre. Love you, love you, love you. Daryl. Oh, my goodness. Miss Robinson, cuckoo, sending y'all much, much love, Linda. I'm so glad that you're with us. Like and share, like and share. I want to share with you today and going forward a lot of what I saw in Tulsa. We're going to have a panel to talk about that in the second hour. We're going to be talking about voting rights in Texas. Voting rights, that struggle, voter suppression, that struggle really is ground zero in Texas, but it's happening all over the country. Republicans are passing laws, and they're passing in the state legislatures that are going to make it significantly more difficult for us to vote come 2022. We're right here in it, everybody. And not just come 2022, just to vote, just to vote. We're going to talk about what is happening, how that is being walked through in Texas, and what it is that we can do to secure our votes wherever we are all over these United States. Call me 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Of course, we're going to have some good news from Dr. Tisha Williams. And let's get to some of these headlines, everybody. Today, it is going to be a scorcher here in the Midwest. 91 degrees in Chicago, mostly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 98 degrees will be your high today. Oh my gosh, and it will be absolutely sunny. Everybody stay cool, and if you can, check on some of our elders and make sure that they're comfortable, okay? All right, everybody. The Dow lost 23 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 141 points, and the S&P 500 closed down 15 points. Wow. Amazing. The Lakers lost yesterday to the Suns. The Suns 113, the Lakers 100. This will be the first time since 2010 that Steph Curry and LeBron James will not be in the finals of the NBA Championship Series. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Oh, well, things change. It's still going to be a great, great series, whoever wins. The Nuggets, 126 to 115 over the Trailblazers, and the Clippers will be playing the Mavs tonight. And boy, oh boy, we had a busy day in baseball. But the Twins, they lost one in a squeaker to the Royals, but they'll be facing off against the Royals tonight. And of course, they went down 6-5. Royals 6, Twins 5. The Cubs, the Giants 7, the Cubs 2. They'll be facing off against again tonight. Maybe the Cubs will come back. The White Sox, though, they held it up for everybody. 4-1 over the Tigers, and they'll be playing them once again tonight. Everybody, what's going on? President Joe Biden announced a plan yesterday to immediately share 25 million COVID-19 vaccines with countries around the world. The progressives are pushing for him to do more. In fact, they're saying people are dying, Joe. That is the headline in Common Dreams. And even though they made this announcement, according to the Associated Press, although the president aims to share 80 million doses globally by the end of June, mostly through the UN backed program COVAX. Um, what do you think about that, everybody? Do you think we can afford not to give people vaccines or these shots that mitigate the worst case scenario of this virus, that mitigate a hospital visit? Think about that, everybody. 2 Senate committees are expected to release a 100 plus page report next week on the security failures that led to the January 6th Capitol riots. The findings from the Senate Rules and Homeland Security and Government Affairs committees will likely provide the basis of a new funding package to beef up Capitol security. President Biden will be heading out on his first international trip since taking office next week. His first stop will be in the UK, where he'll meet with Prime Minister Boris Johnson ahead of the G7 summit in southwestern England. He's set to hold meetings with other leaders of G7 countries like Canada and France and Germany, Italy, and Japan during his visit. 10,000 volunteers have dropped out of the Tokyo Olympics, and yet they still plan to mount the Olympics in a matter of weeks. What do you think about that? They open in 49 days. What do you think about that? Will they be able to go for it? Doctors and athletes are calling for the Olympics to be postponed. What do you think? I want to hear from you. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Wow. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Bernard Kempter, attempted to share the history of Memorial Day at an event in Hudson, Ohio on Monday, noting that freed black slaves played a key role in making the holiday after the Civil War. In fact, black people started the Memorial Day holiday. They saw that white Union soldiers had been dumped in mass graves, which is an insult to a soldier. They had been dumped in these graves without honor. They went in, they exhumed the bodies, they dug them up, and they gave them proper burials, and they had a huge celebration. More than 10,000 people attended. They marched around their graves and gave them a proper burial. That is the first true Memorial Day. Well, guess what? The 77-year-old Army medic, he's a veteran, accused organizers of an American Legion Memorial Day event of censoring him on Wednesday after his microphone was cut as he attempted to share how the holiday was originally celebrated by black people. As he tried to share that history, they cut off his mic. Now, he was invited to serve as the keynote speaker at an event hosted by the Hudson American Legion Auxiliary in Hudson, Ohio. But they cut the mic when he started talking about the black origins of Memorial Day. People, we got a lot of work today. GOP governor's termination of jobless aid could cost local economies over $12 billion, everybody. So let's get right to it. I want to hear some good news. Has anyone been watching did anyone see the Friends reunion? You know, their producer is taking a lot of heat, just so that you know, before we go to you, Reverend Dr. Williams, because of their all white casting. I mean, they didn't have blacks on the show at all. And so they're facing a lot of complaints. They got a lot of complaints when they were on the air. And this is from a popculture.com report. Lack of minority cast members on the show. Wow. And the producers, according to this report, are not apologizing for their previous decisions. Executive producer Kevin Bright didn't mince his words when confronted with this history. He said the chemistry between these 6 actors speaks for itself. He said, "What can I say? I wish Lisa was black. I loved this cast. I love the show, and I love the experience. I know Marta has a different feeling about it. I think it affects us all." And that is the co-creator Marta Kaufman. She said, "There probably are 100 things I would have done differently. I've talked about it in the past, and I do have very strong feelings about my participation in the system. But it comes down to I didn't know what I didn't know." Wow. Something to think about. Reverend Williams, Tisha Williams. Whoa. I mean, I guess when we look back, I mean, but when Friends was on the air, that was a complaint.
That was
Because you also had a different world, right?
You really did.
So
But I'm reminded of I'm sorry.
No, please.
I'm reminded of an interview. I think it was Spike Lee had one time, and someone asked him why. I'm hoping this is Spike Lee. I hope I'm getting this right about why there aren't white people casted in his films. And he said no one would ever ask Woody Allen why black people weren't cast in his film. And he was talking about his lens and how he tells our story. And so I think this is that's the story they knew. As she said, I didn't know what I didn't know. And maybe that was highly reflective of the relationships they had in their lives.
Well, I mean, yeah.
And
Because, the fact is America still is a very, very segregated country. That's very
correct.
true. And
Correct.
so...
and would we have complained if they had a black person and didn't write them properly
Of
or
course.
stereotype them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, don't just put a black face in a high place. Get inside the culture. But I think, I think that there's a lot that we have to learn, to be frank with you. I think
Sure.
that there's a lot that we have to learn. And so, moving forward, and let's not paint an America that is not. America is very segregated. You can have a fantasy about what you want America to be, but let's get real. Because even the apartment that they were in, with their jobs, they couldn't have afforded them in New York City. But that's a whole different story.
Not at all.
you know that. So I was like,
as a New Yorker, not at all.
As a former New Yorker, trust and believe. No. Okay?
We know what we're talking about.
We know what we're talking about. Are you kidding me? But it's wonderful to hear your voice. Wonderful to hear your voice. So talk to me.
Well,
Give us some good news today. You always have so much wonderful stuff to give us.
Great. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Welcome back. Thinking about everything that's in the headlines and all that we're going through today, I want to talk about how to be a team player this morning, Santita. I'm looking at Matthew 9, where Jesus is encountered by a woman who had a disease or issue of blood for 12 years and touches the hem of his garment and is healed. Today, I want to remind you that many of us, not all, but many of us have a very special job. And our job is that we are representatives of God and Son. Even with that job, Santita, we wouldn't be able to afford that friend's apartment. We work for God and Son. As believers, you're God's representatives. You are co-laborers. You are kingdom ambassadors. And here's what I love about God and Son. God and Son is comprised of a CEO, a manager, and a supervisor, like most businesses. Before there was Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, or any of these mega billion-dollar moguls, the Bible says in the beginning, God created. God the Creator has absolute power over everything. God created the original empire. God is our founder and CEO, creating, communicating, and implementing the company's vision, mission, and overall direction. Jesus, our manager, identifies, nurtures, and grooms employees who would ultimately become the future of the business. And then there's the Holy Spirit, the supervisor, the linking pin between management and the workers, in addition, counseling and correcting us as needed. My brothers and sisters, we serve the best management team, and the best management team needs the best team players. We can't do this without each other. But what is a team player? A team player is a member of a group who tries to do what is good for the group rather than what is good for just himself or herself. In sports, a team player doesn't hog the ball but passes when necessary. In business, team players don't take credit for the presentation but gives credit where credit is due. Team players as believers, Philippians says they're not obsessed with getting their own advantage, but forget themselves long enough to lend a helping hand. And Neo says a team player is a movement by themselves, but we are a force when we're together. We make each other better. That's because teamwork isn't just good for morale. It also sets you up for greater success. Aren't we in a season right now where we could use a little setup for greater success? Teamwork brings together different points of view and allows for creativity and fresh ideas to flourish. And so in this 9th chapter of Matthew, Jesus and his disciples exemplify the qualities of a good team. Reliable, responsible, resilient, and ready to work. It always won't be under ideal circumstances. Hello, pandemic. It won't always be convenient. But as a team player, your best ability is your availability. Let me help you. Jesus is on his way to help one person when he's approached by someone else. We're always fascinated by the steps of Jesus, but have you ever considered his stops? Jesus was always stopped during prayer, stopped in the temple, stopped while eating. He's even stopped long enough, dying on the cross long enough to care for the deceased next to him. Being reliable means being stopped. These same set of events were recorded in Mark and Luke, but Matthew paints the picture of these events as one long day. Working for God is a 24-hour, 7-day a week, 31 day a month, 365 day a year gig. There is no clocking out. And contrary to popular belief, we are not only called to serve on Sundays between the hours of 9 and 3. Jesus is on his way, and he finds this woman approaches him. After all she's been through, she's relying on Jesus. She comes into his personal space, the theory that an individual has ownership of their immediate surroundings. She believed that if she got into his personal space, she would be healed. The law of physics calls it energy transference. I have a question. Are you transferring the right energy today? Encouragement to those who are down, strength to those who've been weakened, joy to those who are depressed, love who finds themselves in the midst of hate. We need to make sure that we are transferring the right energy. If you're a team player, it ought to be evident. Team players cheer, they don't chastise. They build, they don't break down. They unify, they do not divide. And here's the tip. Team players trust their coach even when they don't like the play. Hello, somebody. I'm reminded of a story. An out-of-towner drove his car into a ditch in a desolated area. Luckily, a local farmer came to him with his big, strong horse named Buddy. So he hitched Buddy to the car and yelled, "Pull, Nellie, pull." But Buddy didn't move. The farmer hollered, "Pull, Buster, pull." Buddy didn't move. Once more, the farmer commanded, "Pull, Coco, pull," and nothing. Then the farmer nonchalantly said, "Pull, Buddy, pull." The horse easily dragged the car out of the ditch. The motorist was most appreciative and very curious. He asked the farmer why he called his horse by the wrong name 3 times. The farmer said, "Oh, Buddy is blind. And if he thought he was the only one pulling, he wouldn't even try." Santita, I'm so glad today that we're not the only ones pulling. I'm pulling for you just as I know you're pulling for me. And you're pulling for a whole community of people who join your show every day. But just know today, if nobody else is pulling for you, Jesus is pulling today. So if you find yourself in a ditch of life today, somebody say, "Pull, Jesus, pull." And that's the good news. Be a team player today.
Amen. I love that. I love that. I love that because, oftentimes we don't realize that as a global community, we're on a team, right? I mean, we are all brothers and sisters, sisters and brothers down here on the earth together. And we need to become team players. What stands in between us and becoming team players, Reverend Williams? Is Reverend Williams still there? Well,
Yes, I apologize. I
no,
had
no,
put you on mute.
no. What's the barrier between becoming a team player and not being a team player? Because I don't think when you travel around the world, you see we're on the same team. We really are.
Correct.
I
We
mean,
really are.
weren't we all one landmass according to biblical legend? And then, everything kind of separated because, God said, okay, you all can't figure out how to get along. Okay, I'll give you something really to think about. You're going to look different, have different tongues, blah, blah, blah. But what can we do to become team players? Because, a pandemic forces you to become a team player because we see we got something airborne and you know what? It doesn't respect persons or borders. What can we do? What
Right.
advice would you give us?
One of the things I think we have to realize when it comes to being a team player, we have to recognize the gifts, talents, and abilities that others have that we do not. I think if we understood and dropped ego and understood we can't do everything and we can't do everything well, and we were more confident and less ego-driven about letting those who do things well do what they do well do it, we would be more of a team player. When it comes to positions, even amongst ourselves, I think about sometimes we're in competition with each other instead of identifying the best person for the job. We all fight for the same role. Instead of going out, having lunch and say, okay, who's better equipped to do this? Is it you? Okay, great. Then every time I encounter the person that has the power to put you in position, I'm going to speak highly of you. I'm going to edify you, trusting that when you get this role, you'll turn around and pull me up. and create a space for me. That's how it should work. That's how team players work. But we sometimes get so ego driven and power hungry that we just move into positions that we have no business being in. And this is everywhere. This is across the board, just for the sake of saying I have this position. So team players are also humble, I believe. They know what they don't know and move accordingly.
They know what they don't know and they move accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And you take your ego out of it, easing God out. You take your ego out of it. You say, hey, 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 this is the song that is best for me to sing.
Correct.
Ah,
Here's what I found, Santita. Everybody wants to be Jesus and nobody wants to be a disciple. And everybody wants to be Christ-like until they find out what Christ is like.
and the cross.
Yeah,
No,
until they find out you
you
have
got to
to
do that too.
associate with people. You have to love people. You have to forgive people.
And you got to get killed
All
by
of it.
people. How about that?
And you got to get crucified by people.
Oh,
Correct.
and overcome that.
Yeah.
And that's the only way your
And-
father's going to let you back in the kingdom after you've forgiven them. Huh? What? Whew.
yeah.
God and Jesus, they have some high standards. But you know what?
Sure.
I have a couple of minutes before I go to break. I've been in Tulsa over the past, well, almost a week. And it has been quite an experience for me that I want you to come back sometime so we can talk about
I'd love that.
healing. Because I think the reason I'm almost I want to talk about it a lot because when you get down to Oklahoma, everybody, you see the indigenous people, you see white people, you see black people, you see really a cross section of the American family and the American issues. You see treaties with the indigenous people that were never respected, that were never observed. You see black people who, in the post-slavery period, built communities. They were not, and these people basically they work for white people. They work for white people,
Mm-hmm.
but in their off time, they opened stores. They opened the hottest movie theater in Tulsa was operated by a black family. The most luxurious black-owned hotel in the United States. That's John Rogers' family, Ariel Capital Management, the Stratford Hotel. Black people, we were the
1 minute.
first people to be hired to do service jobs because coming out of slavery, we ran the great houses of the United States, and we built them. We built the White House. We were the most skilled artisans. We were the most skilled. And it was reflected in Tulsa. And yet it was destroyed. So when we talk about reparations, Reverend, we're talking about restitution. Just give me my stuff back. How about that?
30.
Absolutely.
Give me my stuff back. Everybody, let's talk about these voting rights on the Santita Jackson Show. What's happening in Texas and why is it important to you and everybody else all over the country in all 50 states and
15.
the territories? I'm Santita Jackson, back in just
10.
minutes. Reverend, I'm so glad to hear you. But I came away with, whew, I know my father keeps pushing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
all these years later, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. When you get down there and you see that this community that was, and it happened in Wilmington. There was a Tulsa in Wilmington, North Carolina. Black people came out of slavery building the most prosperous communities in the United States, and they were destroyed by their white neighbors.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So we got to talk about that, everybody, because you know what? America's not going to be right, Reverend, until all this stuff gets resolved. Would you not agree? I got a minute before we
I
disconnect.
absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. I believe we can't move toward the future without confronting some of these things in the past. There's so much hurt. There's so many layers, and we have to be willing to confront it and do the right thing.
Oh yeah.
Not just confront it. We don't need another monument. We don't need another. We need real We need real representation. We need real reparations. We don't need another monument. We don't need another day dedicated to. We don't need any of that. We need America to do the right thing. As you said, give us our stuff back. Give us our stuff back. Every fighting chance we ever had was stolen and robbed from us. Give us our stuff back.
Just give me my stuff back. And since now, when you're in Oklahoma, you can't have the mineral rights. I'm wondering if you had the mineral rights along with land ownership. Remember, that's oil country, everybody.
Correct.
So I want the black descendants of Tulsa to own the land under the same laws that they bought the land. If they have mineral rights, give it to them. If you strike oil on your patch of grass, it's my stuff. You took it from me.
It belongs to me.
It belongs to me. Oh yeah.
It belongs to
So
me.
I said, girl, I said, I'm not gonna stand. I said, I was on the prayer wall. I'm gonna put my hand on that. I'm with that.
Yeah.
I said, but you know what? Don't chisel me in a piece of marble. Don't put my name in there. Give my descendants their money back. Give them their land back.
Correct.
And I don't want money. I want my land. Because the land is a gift that keeps on giving. Give it back to me.
Yes. That's what my daddy always says. He says, get land. He said, God is not making any new acres.
Hey, but that's what
We have Commissioner Ellis.
Thank you. Scarlett O'Hara's father said that to her in Gone with the Wind. And he was
an
Irishman who was from England who could not own his own land. The Irish are the N-words of the UK. That's what they will tell you. So you know what? I've got Commissioner Texas Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis with us. I want you to say hello to one of the preachingest women, one of the preachingest human beings. Commissioner Ellis, y'all need to get her down there with Freddie Haynes. She reminds you of Freddie Haynes. So.
Oh wow!
I was with Freddie Haynes Saturday. Reverend, come on with it now. Give me a little
30.
This early in the morning. You know I love some preaching and I love some Santana. That's the only thing, Santita and Santana. That's what would get me up this early in the morning. Set the alarm clock. Come on now.
It's an honor to meet you, sir.
15.
You gotta love this man. He just is crazy, but we love him. He's also
an honor to meet you.
He's also a fugitive.
5.
But at least he wasn't in his other life. I think he got too many kids and said, I can't do this running away anymore.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious. Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. All of my morning stars, like and share. I want you to please like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel. And we are streaming on WCPT 820, that Facebook page, the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. page. I want you all to meet me over on Instagram on Santita Jackson IG and Twitter at Santita J or at the Santita Jackson Show. That's right. We want to talk about voting rights today, everybody, because guess what? While we were celebrating this tremendous victory, at least at the top of the ticket in November of 2020, Republicans had cleared the decks really because they were still winning on the state levels. And then they went to work on taking back our voting rights. And it is seen most clearly in Texas as they have advanced a bill that limits how and when voters can cast ballots, receive mail-in voting applications, and on and on and on it goes. And this is happening all over the country, but we need to look at Texas because Texas appears to be the template. Of course, Harris County Commissioner, member of this family for the show, on the Santita Jackson Show, Rodney Ellis, I had to get him up early. Although he's up anyway, because please, Harris County is about to overtake Chicago as the third. Houston's about to overtake Chicago as the third largest city in the country, if you can believe that. But that is all under his umbrella, and of course, we're glad to have you back because we need to know what are you doing in Texas. What?
Well, Santita, first of all, it is, as you said, part of a national pattern. I think they slipped the first one of these voter suppression bills through in Iowa, which is an important state because it is such a bellwether for presidential primaries. Then think of the two states they focus on next. Georgia was one of them, and Arizona, and then Texas. Texas, by the way, is now one of maybe 5 in the country. You wouldn't have thought that about Texas. In fact, more diverse than where you are, than Illinois, and it's a big state. I mean, if the Democrats can predictably carry California and New York, unless we really mess up, if they get Texas or Florida, it's about over. Think of what happened in Florida with Andrew Gillum. So that's why we call this Jim Crow 2.0. They focus on Harris County in particular because we were very creative, followed the law. We had 24-hour voting. Why wouldn't you have 24-hour voting? You can go to the grocery store, 24 hours. You don't have a constitutional right to go eat. You got me? Eat more than you ought to eat. We did everything we could. They restrict us from doing that, restrict us from the number of polling places we can have, restrict us from being able to have, pews to the polls, because that's when we, African Americans, go and vote. All of this came out of the Heritage Foundation. It was a pattern. In fact, when they were passing the bill in Texas, the thing was full of typographical errors because they were just cutting and pasting stuff from the Heritage Foundation, right-wing group, that's pushing this all around the country. Well, the Texas House members had enough. So they followed an age-old tradition, by the way, that came out of Illinois. I'll tell you about that in a second. They just broke the quorum. You got to have a certain number of the 150 House members to conduct business. You got to have 100 of them show up. So that means the Democrats just needed to make sure that they kept over 50 of their members, 51 plus, at least 51 of their members, and they couldn't conduct business. It was difficult to organize that on short notice, all those diverse personalities. You know, sometimes folks want to suck up to the leadership, but they did it. They went to a black church for about 90 minutes. They didn't know if the Speaker of the House would call the Texas Rangers out to arrest them, to just bring them to the Capitol and make a quorum. So somebody sent me an article about when we broke the quorum. You might remember this in 2003. Tom DeLay was redistricting. You had to recall in Florida, the recount in Florida from Bush v. Gore, from that controversial election, so they didn't want to count the ballots. You had the recall going on in California. They were recalling the governor, Gray Davis. That's how Arnold Schwarzenegger ended up winning. And then in Texas, they went to redistrict. Just do it again. They'd done it one time in 2001 when the census came out. They decided, well, we didn't get enough, and now we control the House and the Senate with the Republican Party and the governor's mansion. We just do it again. Well, we broke the quorum. So somebody sent me that article I'd forgotten about. When we broke the quorum in Texas, 11 state senators, we just went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, following our House members who earlier during the regular session got on buses and went to Oklahoma to get across the state lines for 2 days. Now, we were gone about 48 days. Now, roll forward. That was 18 years ago. My daughter, who's about to go to Syracuse, coming out of high school, was born on a Sunday. I left going back to Austin on that Monday. On Wednesday, we broke the quorum. I didn't see Alicia, my wife, your dear friend, for 30 days, and didn't see that little girl for 30 days. Now, my wife sent the other kids to the right way. But look, we were following Abraham Lincoln. He was fighting as a Republican some Whig legislation. I think it was going after banks at your state capitol in Illinois. And he jumped out of the second floor window of some church, maybe Second Presbyterian or something, almost broke his leg trying to break the quorum. So we were just following Abraham Lincoln, and these House members were, it's important. And one reason why they did it was to put the focus, pressure on our friends on the national level, pass the voting protection laws that we need, including the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It's so important. Whatever Senator Manchin needs that's legal, give it to him. If you got to pave every road in West Virginia, nothing is more important than the right to vote. Everything they want to get rid of. Senator Warnock, they want to get rid of so many gains that we made around Texas and around this country in Illinois. I mean, it would just change the face of the country. Your dad, Reverend Jackson and King, realized if we are given the right to vote, We're not asking for an advantage. Just give us our constitutional right. Be fair about it. I mean, why can't you go mail a absentee ballot to all eligible voters? And if they qualify, let them send it back. And why should it just be the campaign that can afford to go and do it? You can target it. You got enough campaign money to do it. Why can't the government, if we want to do that on a local level, send it out? I hope that on the federal level, they'll go in and force these states to get rid of these repressive voter IDs laws that started about a decade ago. And this is all designed for a group of people increasingly becoming the minority, really a sliver of the far right Republican Party to control the government. They can't do it based on policies. They can't do it based on ideas. So they want to do it by rigging the rules, and that's called Jim Crow 2.0.
Talk to me. Your lieutenant governor had a press conference in which he became very emotional about this because people said this is targeting black and brown people. It's going to even hit poor people. And he almost became tearful, Commissioner. He said, wait. This is about voter security. What are you talking about? In other countries, talk to me. Because this is a very emotional issue, and he put forth this very emotive argument. I said, what are you talking about?
He came to power as a talk show host and is still running like he's a talk show host in a very powerful position in Texas, where he presides over the Senate, small Senate of 31 members. He was first elected to the state Senate and then ended up becoming lieutenant governor in an interesting scenario when the election was moved in part over redistricting. They were greedy, trying to grab too many seats in the House and the Senate and in the U.S. House. So we contested it in court, and the election was moved. So more of the moderate Republicans were off out of Texas. Election primaries normally in March. It was moved to the summer when the folks who had money, reasonable Republicans, were out of state. They were in Chicago or somewhere, California. So he won because of that far-right sliver, and he's operating that way. Here's the interesting thing. Used to be a time when people didn't want to be called racist. Now I'm told by some of my former colleagues in the state legislature, they want you to call them racist because then they can put out an email and raise money off of it and then get up and have a speech and act as though they're crying, as though they are offended that you would attack them. And it's a way to raise money. You're sort of like those people who descended on the Capitol, and one of them has raised a fortune for legal fees.
Right.
By sending out a letter saying that you're being attacked. But it's all fake and it's ridiculous. If you know anybody in West Virginia, we got to pass that federal voting rights act.
Well, because I want to know, because you continue to tie this, and you never miss the opportunity to look at how the tie between this restriction, these barriers that they place between voting rights and Americans and slavery. And you even went to a Houston Chronicle article that makes this tie. Why is that tie important? And please make it for me. For those of us who were not, quote, enslaved states, but,
It's important because this is not new. In states like Texas, once we got the right to vote and Reconstruction occurred, you had a large number of African Americans, women, by the way, much more progressive whites who ended up holding power. So they came up with a host of schemes like a white man's primary. You know what I mean? So you could change who could vote in a primary, and they got away with it. All kinds of intimidation tactics, the poll tax, and passed these through state legislatures. And they have continued to do that. Reconstruction only lasted for a quick minute, and once they shut it down, they came up with a host of anything they could come up with. They'd say that you were cheating. They've been looking for voter fraud in Texas as long as you've heard the legend of Bigfoot. You start with all this language like purity of the ballot. It's ridiculous. And it has a chilling impact on people exercising their right to vote. And it has worked, by the way. For so long, people thought it was okay to pay a poll tax. Why wouldn't you pay to go and vote? My dad was 99 years old when he died. He had to pay a poll tax. Or when you had to go and pass a literacy test and they just make up some stuff if you were black. You know, you've heard the stories, how many jelly beans are in this jar, and got away with it for so long. That's why during your dad's era of struggling with Dr. King, getting rid of these restrictive laws in the South and all around the country. That's how people came up with schemes like you would have to run citywide instead of from a district. When Barbara Jordan first went to the state Senate in Texas, she had to run in a district larger than a congressional district at the time. A state Senate seat was much smaller. She had to run in a much larger district, and that was the way for the downtown crowd to make sure that they got the right people in. And primarily it was targeted to keep blacks out, to keep Hispanics out, to keep women out, and to keep white liberals or moderates out. And for a very long time in this country, it worked until the Voting Rights Act was passed.
How will this reshape voting in Harris County? This is one of the largest, most populous, most diverse counties in the United States of America. I mean, you house Houston, which is about to overtake Chicago as the third largest city in the country. You have everybody there. What did voting look like in 2020? You know, the progressive changes. What will it look like in 2022 if this law holds?
During the middle of a pandemic, people were shocked to see how many votes came out because we made it easier. In 2016, we had 1.3 million people to go and vote in Harris County. In 2018, you know, it went down to 1.2. That was not a presidential year. In 2020, 1.6 million. So just think about that. 1.3, 2016. 1.2, non-presidential year. It went down in 2018. In 2020, 1,656,000 people went to vote. It is a big county, as you said. So is Cook County, so Chicago. You know, you talk about almost 5 million people. I think Cook might be 5.1, we 4.9. That's larger than 26 states. So both Cook County and Harris County, Houston and Chicago, the counties that they are in, are really mid-sized states. You know, if Cook County was a separate state, you ought to justify having votes to the Electoral College on your own, and 2 U.S. senators, by the way, bigger than 25, 26 states. So it matters. And, you know, a diverse county, people are trying to hold on the power because they lost it. So we just did common sense measures to make it easier for people to vote. They had this law during the pandemic where old law said you had to vote from a structure. So we constructed some sheds, and that qualified as a structure. We let people go vote in the garage at the basketball arena, places where they go during the pandemic. We want to let you vote in your car because people were afraid to go vote. And we spent money, by the way. It was legal. We spent CARES money to go and do it. And that made people angry because what we thought would happen did happen. When people showed up, drive-through voting allowed 127,000 residents to cast their votes. They weren't all black or Hispanic, but, you know, because they're such a large minority populations, a lot were. And so what if there were black and brown? There were whites who did as well. We got a bright young guy that will come out, our Harris County clerk, the state, took us to court, fighting it every step of the way. We lost a few battles, but won most of them, and they were angry. So most of this language in the Texas bill was targeted with a bullseye on Harris County because this county is about 25% of the electorate in the state, and they worried about Beto or whoever may run. You know, Mayor Turner may decide he will run statewide with U.S. Senate or something down the road. They saw what happened with Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum, and it scared them. Warnock winning, they're afraid. They want to hold on to power, and we ought to fight this. We ought to stop it. It is racist, and they can dance around it all that they want. They can use the fact that we said to go raise all the right-wing money. They won't. We got to fight. We got to stand up. I'm proud of those Texas House members for breaking the quorum, and it did put it front and center in the national news. They won't see CNN every hour, all day, Memorial Day. front page of the New York Times on Tuesday, and I hope it creates the momentum. I'm so proud that Vice President Kamala Harris is going to take the lead. I think President Biden said when you all were in Oklahoma with Reverend the other day that this month of June, we ought to have a very concerted effort because of getting the Voting Rights Act reenacted, get it passed again, because if this stuff becomes law and you no longer have to pre-clear, it's a more convoluted process having to go to court in every state and go to right-wing judges to see what will happen. So it's imperative. They'll call the Texas legislature back in a special session, and we'll see what happens. You know, maybe my former state senate colleagues will do what we did. You know, my daughter turned out fine. It was a sacrifice to be away from home 45 days. I didn't know then you could work remotely. You know, Santita, I remember once I went to see Alicia and the kids. They were in Atlanta, so we were in Albuquerque. I went up from Albuquerque, New Mexico, all the way to Minneapolis, by the way. I couldn't cross Texas. Most flights are just, Texas is so big. If I'd flown across Texas, I was afraid they could ping my phone to have the plane land, arrest me, and take me to make a call. So I went from Albuquerque all the way up to Minnesota, waited at the airport about 6 hours to get a connection, to go down the other way, don't go over Texas, to get to first New Orleans to try to hustle a little business so I could pay my bills. And they had a Republican governor and attorney general, so nobody knew I was there. And then I did a interview with a reporter when I was at the airport. They ran it in the New Orleans paper when I left because we were on the run. We were fugitives for 48 days. Then I went on to Atlanta and kept my mouth shut, didn't make any noise. You know, no tweeting if it was going on in 01, no Facebooking, you know. Look, I don't know what they'll do when they go back in special session. They also killed some other awful bills in the process, by the way. A bill that would make it harder for us to meet the constitutional requirements for bail. You know, they want to make sure that they can keep as many folks in jail, even if they're not a threat to society in Texas. They killed that bill. They call it bail reform. It was not that. And a host of other bad bills were killed in the process. So we'll see what happens when they call a 30-day special session in Texas.
We're talking with Texas Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis. He's talking about this attack on voting rights that's happening all over the country. Of course, Texas has become ground zero for that because some of these legislators heroically, in my opinion, have broken the quorum. They've said, you know what, we're not going to be in this room because if we're not in the room, we can't conduct business, we can't pass these laws. But how long will that last, everybody? And what about the economic impact? Commissioner Ellis, I mean, can people boycott? Are people inclined to boycott? Or are you seeing economic pressure from corporations who are getting pressure from their customers who are saying, wait a minute, this isn't going to work? I mean, what could this potentially cost Texas? I mean, we're watching the Olympics, right? You know, people are saying, you know, you got to get the Olympics, go, let it go forward because that's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Got it. Okay, so what health? Georgia.
It could cost Texas about $16.7 billion by 2025 because of boycotts. People may decide not to bring conventions to Texas. They could decide not to bring the NCAA finals to Texas. If we were to be successful at getting a Super Bowl bid because of voter suppression laws, they could decide to pull out. In Georgia, as an example, a number of corporations came out and spoke out publicly because they know if people call for a boycott of Georgia over voter suppression laws, it would have an impact on tourism. I would be hard-pressed to go to Georgia for a convention. If I could control one that was going to Georgia, I'd say I love Georgia. It's on my mind. But until they change those oppressive, racist laws, I'd get out. And I would encourage the same thing about Texas. So we went to our Great Eastern Partnership, our Chamber of Commerce, asked them to speak out. They did not do that. The mayor of Houston and our county executive, our county judge, as we refer to her, Lena Hidalgo, decided they would not give that state of the county and state of city speeches at the partnership, but it could impact business. The reason that American Airlines, Dell Computers, and others have spoken out is because people would call for, and I would support, boycott of businesses. So we're going to go back to the business community, put the press coverage on this and say, y'all speak up. I mean, why wouldn't we go and say that we're not going to go and have a convention in some state, economic boycott of businesses in a given state if you have these kind of racist voter suppression laws? Is a very common tactic that your dad pioneered. That's what took him to Chicago, by the way. Instead of being in Atlanta, is very much part of the doctrine that Dr. King and others advocated. Hit them where it hurts in their pocketbook. We need to stop this by any means necessary, as Brother Malcolm said. And that includes economic boycotts on my great state of Texas. If they pass it, there ought to be a price to pay. Georgia did it. Arizona did it. Iowa did it. Florida did it. There ought to be a price to pay.
I only have a couple of minutes left. Some people would say, Stacey Abrams has said, look, I don't know if we need to do a boycott yet of Georgia because this could hurt working people. But you're saying, wait a minute. I'm not saying that you are differing, but even if you are, that's okay. It's no sin. Why would she said working people would be hurt? The average person would be hurt. What do you say?
You have to do something, Santita. Hey, it's a valid point, but you have to do something. In Texas, not only did they decide to suspend the rules to bring the bill up in the Senate out of its regular order, they also voted to go outside the bounds of what was in either the House bill or the Senate bill. They went what you call a conference committee to reconcile it to. So let's decide, okay, we're going to change the rules and bring it up out of order. And we're going to change the rules to go outside the bounds of what was considered in either chamber and add some new stuff to really sock it to them, so to speak. And then we're going to ram it on through. By the way, they got rid of our should we call it, filibuster standard. You used to have a 2/3 vote to bring a bill up in the Texas Senate. That's why we broke the quorum over redistricting back in 2003. They decided, well, we're just going to get rid of the 2/3 rule as it relates to this bill. So we got angry, broke the quorum. Now imagine filibuster was started on the federal level, by the way, as a racist tactic to keep civil rights legislation from passing. And so now they use that to keep
1 minute
stuff, including civil rights from passing. But look, you got to do something. You remember one of Dr. King's famous speeches? I think it was in Memphis. Was it Seal Test or some bread company?
Oh, yeah.
He says in his speech.
Well,
yeah.
Well, this was, I think, the
CEO of the
last
company
speech
would
before he
meet with
died, right? He was talking about boycotts. He said, you got to boycott.
Yeah. So with this bread company, they said, we can't talk to you, Dr. King. You can talk to our advisor. Mr. Bob Brown is our advisor. So Dr. King says, well,
30.
Mr. Bob Brown was his advisor too. But but look, Mayor Keisha Bottoms, I got it. She was concerned about it. She's mayor of the Senate.
15.
She had reservations. I want
seconds.
Stacey Abrams to be governor. Yes, they
10.
can say that. But no, I think you ought to boycott them. You got to hit them somewhere.
You know what?
5.
And you're right. We need to understand where they're coming from. We get it. But the rest of us, boycott. Boycott. Texas Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis. Brilliant man of great principle and action. We love you and thank you so much for being with us today. Got to keep our eyes on Texas and on Illinois.
Love you, Santita.
I love you. Give Leisha and all the kids my love. My godchildren. Love it. Stay right there, everybody. Yeah. Let's talk about Tulsa on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Commissioner Ellis.
All right, Santita. I'm gone. Thank you. If I'd known you all were going to Tulsa, I would have gone.
I wish you had been
told
there.
me to go. I should have gone. If I'd known just to see Reverend again, I saw him in D.C. Briefly when he was there with the group from India on getting vaccines to him. But, hey, I love you. Anytime you call me, I'm glad to get up now and go back and have a 30-minute snoozer before I take a shower. Thank you
so much.
Bye-bye.
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 Oh, boy. Everybody. Hey. I am very, very excited to be talking about Tulsa today, and I'm so excited to be back with you all. I missed you guys. I missed everybody. I really, really did. I missed you. Oh, ka-choo. Missed you. And, but let's talk about Tulsa. I want to share with you what we've seen and want to bring Reverend Dr. Robert Turner, who is the pastor who invited us down there, the pastor of the historic Vernon AME Church, where where they have the prayer wall. Their basement survived the bombing. Mm. And so did the Stratford Hotel. Well, they survived that 18-hour massacre. And then when the attackers realized that the Stratford Hotel had been saved, they flew the airplanes over it and bombed it. Whew. We got to talk about this because, as we talk about reparations, we need to be talking about getting our money back. Reparations was baked into the end of slavery, 40 acres and a mule. You've got to give them something. That was the thinking of the government. And even that was taken away. Give me what I'm due. That's it. So we're going to talk about that, everybody. Got to talk about that. We want to share with you what we've seen. Reverend Dr. Turner is going to tell us what the steps are going forward. And we're going to have Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push, who was down there as well. Dwight McKee, who has such brilliant insights. Attorney C.K. Hoffley, who tries cases like this all the time. And attorney Mark Fancher. He's got a lot to say, but I cannot wait to hear everyone's thoughts today. Everyone's thoughts about this. So, and I want to hear yours. So call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want to know what you think should be done going forward about Tulsa. Do the descendants have a right to return? Should they get the land of their foreparents? Should that land be restored to them? I mean, because when you go down there, you see the gentrification. Oh, and the gentrification is real. It's real, and because land. What did Reverend Tisha Williams say? You make a lot of new stuff in the world, but you don't make new land. There's no new acreage. Land is land is land is land, and it's a big deal to have it. Big deal to have it, particularly when that land potentially has vast mineral riches underneath. So, got a lot of talk.
We have Attorney Fancher.
Attorney Fancher, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be back from Tulsa. I didn't realize how important the trip would be to me until I got back yesterday, and I really just started thinking about it. Mark, and there's nothing like going and seeing, and feeling the devastation and seeing where the Black community is today there. Because some of the richest people in America live in Tulsa, live in Oklahoma, and some of the poorest. And it's we've got to get it right. We've got to get it right.
That's very true.
Got to get it right. But I hope that you and your family had a wonderful Memorial Day.
I will say that we're blessed. Ran into some health challenges with my mother, but hopefully things are stabilized. So, okay. But yeah.
I will keep you and your mother in my prayers. Bless your heart.
Very much appreciated.
Bless your heart. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. We're going to keep her lifted up in prayer. Hey, Nina, sending you much love, my dear sister friend, and Meddy, and Barbara Bacon. Hey, you all are saying hello to each other. I love it. Miss Wanda, I love you. I'm going to call you Miss Wanda because Miss Wanda is close to the woman who's about to become the chief of police in Memphis, Tennessee. I want to get her on the show. Miss Wanda is a very, very dear friend of ours, Attorney Fancher. Very, very sweet. She and Mr. Corey, my mother's best friend. He's their neighbor in Washington, D.C. Former teacher, brilliant photographer, and just a dear, sweet spirit, as is she. Please tell Mr. Corey we love him. I love him. And I'm going to call you Miss Wanda. Miss Wanda, I saw your guy, of course, Reverend Dr. William Barber, who's going to be on our show in a few
We have Mr. McKee.
To talk about what he saw in Tulsa, because we saw a lot. Dwight McKee, how are you?
Fine. How you all doing?
Good. We've got Mark Fancher with us, attorney Mark Fancher.
What's up, Red Mark? I'm fine. How you doing, Dwight? Pretty fair.
Pretty fair.
Okay.
Oh, boy. Well, just keep on trying, everybody, Paul, because we're going to have Jonathan Jackson with us, and we're going to have Reverend Dr. Turner with us. We're going to have quite the panel, quite the panel. So let me call my brother and see where he is. Maybe he's with Reverend Sharpton.
We have Attorney Hoffler.
Pastor Al denied that, by the way.
30.
Oh, please. I wish I did. Oh, get out of here. There were people standing around. Hey, honey, should we call you now? Okay. Paul, you can call Jonathan Jackson now. And then
Okay.
Reverend Dr. Turner. Thank you. Just
Okay.
continue to try them.
Okay.
Okay.
10.
Thank you.
Hi, Santita.
Hey, girl, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing great.
Well, y'all are right.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. We are victorious. I'm Santita Jackson. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. That's one of my homes. And of course, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So good to be with you today. After I've been in Tulsa, Oklahoma for almost a week. Can't wait to talk about that in just a couple minutes. We want to let you know what it was like to be there. We discovered while we were there and what the path forward is for us going forward. Friday, June 4th, 2021. That is the date. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 91 degrees, mostly sunny. I guess the summer is here, everybody. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 98 degrees will be your high. Unbelievable sunny. The Dow closed down 23 points yesterday. The Nasdaq closed down 141 points, and the S&P 500 closed down 15. Guess what? 2010. Think about that, everybody. That was the last. Wait a minute. I can't believe it. The Lakers lost. So this will be the first NBA Finals without LeBron James and Steph Curry, either of them, since 2020, since 2010. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Whoo, it's a new day, everybody. The Lakers fell to the Suns, 113 to 100. The Nuggets, well, 126, 115 over the Trailblazers. The Clippers will be playing the Mavs tonight. It's going to be fantastic. Who will be the champions this year? I don't know. We're going to see. The Twins, well, they fell to the Royals. The Royals 6, the Twins 5. Perhaps they will redeem themselves tonight. The Twins and the Royals will face off once again. The Cubs, well, they fell to the Giants. The Giants 7, the Cubs 2. They're playing again tonight. And of course, but the White Sox, they pulled it in for us. White Sox 4, the Tigers 1. They'll be playing once again tonight, everybody. What about these vaccines? Well, it seems like that is the order of the day. More and more people are saying, how can America help in this fight against this pandemic? He announced yesterday, President Biden did, a plan to immediately share 25 million COVID-19 vaccines with countries around the world. But progressives are pushing for him to do more. This headline in Common Dream says it all. People are dying, Joe. Wow. The White House announced its plan to donate these 25 million excess COVID-19 vaccines, but people are saying that this is not enough. You have got a worldwide pandemic. Can America do more? Should it do more? Wow. According to this report, the President of the United States has $16 billion available for vaccine scale-up, more than enough to vaccinate the entire world in less than a year. The administration has barely used any of it. What do you think about everybody? What do you think about that, everybody? What do you think about these Tokyo Olympics? That's becoming a bigger story. all the time. 10,000 volunteers have dropped out. The Tokyo Olympics will be opening in 49 days. Will they be able to do that? 10,000 of the 80,000 unpaid volunteers have told organizers they will not participate when the games open on July 23rd. That's just a few weeks away, everybody. Japan is moving forward with the Olympics, even though more and more Japanese people and officials are saying no. The governors, the GOP governors, termination of jobless aid could cost local economies over $12 billion, everybody. What do you think about that? And everyone remembers Friends, right? We all loved that show. Well, guess what? Well, they just had their reunion, and decades later, people are asking about the all white casting. Following their reunion, producers of the popular sitcom are facing a lot of complaints that have resurfaced. A large one being that was leveled against them years ago: the lack of people of color as cast members on the show. The producers, however, are not apologizing. They're saying Kevin Bright, who was the executive producer, didn't mince his words when confronted with the history of in The Hollywood Reporter. He had an interview with them. He said the chemistry between these 6 actors speaks for itself. He said, what can I say? I wish Lisa was black. He said, I love the cast, I love the show, and I love the experience. I know Maria Marta has a different feeling about it, but I think it affects us all, and that is his co-creator, Marta Kaufman, who says, I didn't know what I didn't know. Bottom line, what do you think about that, everybody? I mean, hey, I love Friends, but A Different World was really my favorite. So what can I tell you? Everybody, let's get to Tulsa, the Tulsa Massacre. The first aerial assault on American soil happened not in Pearl Harbor, and although Hawaii was a territory at the time, it was not a state yet. Had a couple of decades for that to happen. The first aerial assault on American soil happened in 1921. It happened in Tulsa. And when you listen to the Mrs. Fletcher, the eldest survivor of this massacre, she talks about hearing the airplanes overhead and the bombs. She said, I hear it every day. Every day. So, what do you think about Tulsa? Should these families have a right to return? What about the multi-generational wealth that was lost? John Rogers from Ariel Capital Investments will be on the show in a few days. His family owned the Stratford Hotel, which was the most successful black-owned hotel in the United States of America. And it was worth $125,000 then. That was a tremendous sum of money in 1921. And guess what? It would have been worth, according to projections, not just projections that he made, but that other people have made, it would have been worth $100 million today. What if they had been allowed to move forward with the development of that hotel? Remember, coming out of slavery, black people were the most sought after artisans, the most skilled artisans, the most skilled workers, the most skilled builders, because that is what we did in slavery. We literally built the country. We cooked, we cleaned. I mean, the Martha Stewarts and the Paula Deans, well, they're kind of biting off of what we have done. That is what we were the people who were hired first. Indeed, Black Tulsa, most of the people who worked there, they worked for white people, but they had other businesses, very industrious people. So let's talk about this, because a lot has been lost and a lot can be regained if we do this correctly. So let's get to this wonderful panel that we have, because we want to talk with them today, and I want to hear from you. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Want to know what you think about Tulsa. Of course, we've got Attorney C.K. Hoffler, the president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, 65,000 plus lawyers. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push, and she tries cases like this all the time, so I can't wait to get her insights. Dwight McKee, noted social scientist, and of course, from the National Conference of Black Lawyers, attorney Mark Fancher. Cannot wait to hear what he has to say about this. But I want to go to you, Jonathan Jackson. Let me go to you first. You are the national spokesman for Rainbow Push. We were down there together. And of course, to fully disclose, this is my brother, my baby brother. And he had his son Noah down there with him. So it was a bit of a family affair. We had a tremendous time, learned a lot. Your thoughts about what we saw this past week, Jonathan?
I'm sorry. I saw the pain the history, and a glimmer of hope for our future in Tulsa. I saw an active case, a murder scene, a crime that was uninvestigated, denied, covered up, that this was never investigated as a crime scene. There's a living witness to the murders that took place. How frustrating that must be for Ms. Viola Fletcher and all the family members that are involved. I would describe this like it's a family affair, and it has to deal with the molestation, if you will. One person committed the crime, another person covered it up, another family did it, and it's gone on for intergenerations. The governors, the mayors, the senators, the presidents have all known about the crime that took place in Tulsa, and no one's ever done anything about it. That's incestuous, and that's molestation in the hands of the Justice Department to never have the crimes investigated, to never receive justice. I would remind you that the state of Oklahoma was formed in 1907 on sovereign Indian territory on a government contract and agreement that was established September 6, 1839 for the Cherokee Nation, with people that were murdered on the Trail of Tears from South Carolina all the way over to Oklahoma. And then this structure was imposed upon an existing government contract. And so it's just been lie after lie. So there's a genocide on top of a murder that's never been resolved. So the state of Oklahoma is 7 years older than Miss Fletcher, who's still alive. So all the wealth that has been produced, all the property has been stolen. And now going forward, there's a baseball field and condominiums and everything that is being built on top of the land in Greenwood that was stolen. There's been a highway plowed straight through the middle of the Greenwood district over the areas that believe where people were buried in mass graves. It just compounds it. But the hope is that when President Biden came, having been the first president in 100 years to step foot in Greenwood, I see a ray of hope. And for him to acknowledge it and to share the pain, but it's never been investigated as a crime scene, and the wealth is being produced and created today is on those lands. These people have a right for restitution. This is not a reparations case, I would say. It's restitution. You know the deeds, you know the lands, you know where the families are in the ancestry. Their land should be returned to them. And then we can have healing going forward. And lastly, I hate to see the shame that I saw on so many young white faces down there, because the white community is in a conundrum where they know something bad happened. One of the persons told me, I don't want to mention his name, but he says, Johnson, I'm a white man. My family still lives on our land that we received, that we got in 1898. He says, my family's been on stolen Indian land since 1898, and we feel bad about that. Does he feel bad enough to return it? No. But it's the shame of it all.
Did you ask him if he felt bad? Of course not. I hope you didn't. But we got out of Tulsa alive. So I know you wanted to.
I just shook my head.
Nothing but the Lord that held your tongue. Thank you. So, but why do you think it's important to shift the discussion from reparations to restitution?
Because you know where the plot of land is. You know you know all the victims. You know all the person's family. That there's a clear line, and I am for reparations, and I'm with that. But this is restitution because you can draw the line from the insurance claims that were never paid to the family members. They know their history. Insurance companies don't go bankrupt. They get absorbed under state law from reinsured companies. So the government planes that were used to drop the bombs. Every time there's a military incident or military action, those are copious notes. So all the details can be traced back to the incident then and to the theft now.
Dwight McKee, you were here in Chicago, but you've been observing this, because of course Tulsa happened in Wilmington. It's happened all over the country. What do you make of Tulsa? What do you make of President Biden going? What do you make of the fact that he was the first president ever to go?
Well, I'm not sure that most presidents even knew about Tulsa. It was so hidden under the veil, and it was hidden for reasons. It was hidden so the questions of restitution and the questions of reparations weren't raised. The one part Johnny left out this conversation is how valuable the oil was in that land and how it became a point of wealth for the last 100 years that developed Oklahoma. I think that my concern is that Oklahoma does not be considered an incident. It should be considered a strategy, because all over the country where they saw Black people making progress in the 20s and the 30s is for some reason they figured out how to create a massacre or a riot to seize the land. And you could trace that to probably 30 to 40 other cities around the country. And so it really should be part of a package deal. It should be part of a whole systematic approach to how you deal with that. The other thing I want to mention, Johnny, is you also have to understand what white people were looking at back in 1920. They had seen Marcus Garvey marching 2 million people through the streets of New York. They had seen Jack Johnson knock white people out all over the country. And all their premises, they had seen these small towns grow up to be prosperous. And had seen Blacks after the Civil War rise up in the South, owning land. They had seen George Washington Carver revolutionize agriculture in the South. And so their fears were real that if Blacks was given an opportunity, that they could become dominant and become tremendously effective in terms of securing equity in America. And so they were tremendously threatened, just like they are today.
What do you see, Mark Fancher?
No, I'm completely on board with what Brother McKee is talking about, because, the thing that has bothered me just a little bit is that there's been almost an exclusive focus on Tulsa, when really it fits within a broader context of the times. They have referred to 1919, or at least the warmer months of it, as Red Summer, because blood flowed so freely, as a result of this white hostility, which was vented in violent ways against Black people in more than 3 dozen cities across the country. A lot of it was triggered by the things that Dwight mentioned, but there were already economic tensions which were making white people nervous. You had Black World War I veterans returning, and you had the Great Migration. You had all kinds of things that were going on that were causing white people to just run roughshod through Black communities, killing and plundering. So this was nothing done in isolation. But not only that, it happened in rural areas too. In 1919 in Phillips County, Arkansas, Black sharecroppers got together and they wanted to resist the debt tenancy system. Now, for those who don't know what that is, that's a system through which white plantation owners managed to maintain slavery even into the 20th century. And the way that they did it is that they would have sharecroppers who were usually former slaves or former slave families, and they would advance them what they needed in order to make it through the winter. And then at the end of harvest, the plantation owner would go and ask them to be repaid. They would pay them what they owed, but then the plantation owner would say, well, there's some interest on this, and so therefore you're still in debt to me, so you're going to have to work another year. And so they kept people tied to the plantations for generations. So in Phillips County, the sharecroppers got together. They hired a lawyer. They were going to resist this, and white people lost their minds. They advanced on them. They just started shooting black people. Randomly. They chased black men and women and children through cotton fields, and in the end, they killed more than 200 of them. But the other thing is that none of we're looking at the early 1920s, 1919, leading up to that. But this is not something that stopped. I mean, you look at the violence that was perpetrated against black people in the form of lynching, in the form of all kinds of church burnings and all kinds of things that happened. And it was not the last time. Tulsa was not the last time that a black community was bombed. In 1985, in Philadelphia, there was a black urban back-to-nature commune that went by the name Move that was located in West Philadelphia. And, the police always hated Move. They had long-term, conflicts with them. But on one particular evening, when they purportedly were going to serve arrest warrants, the police massed outside of the Move compound, and then a helicopter flew over it and dropped a bomb on it. And not only did it destroy the Move compound, but because it was a row house connected to lots of other houses, it destroyed 2 blocks of a black community, destroyed 61 homes occupied by black people. So, we have to consider this in context. And while I certainly agree that, there is restitution that's owed, that's dollar for dollar repayment of what is lost. In a broader sense, all of these things have had a huge impact on the broader black community to the extent that reparations are also owed.
Everybody, let's talk about it. What do you think? When we come back, Attorney C.K. Hoffler is going to talk to us about the right to return. Is there legal standing for the descendants to get their land back? When we were down there, my brother can attest to this. I got 30 seconds, Jonathan. We saw a lot of development happening in the Greenwood section. Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. Thank you, Gap Band. 30 seconds, Johnny. They belong to you.
Phenomenal development. $1,800 a month rent, walkable parks. And so now the Greenwood District has a beautiful tourist attraction to share the history. But I don't want it to be a marker at a point in time. The crime scene is still active. They're just building over it, developing over it, putting a highway over it. How
30.
Frustrating. So when Ms. Fletcher said, I've never seen justice in my lifetime, the state is 7 years older than this woman, and now they're building on top of what was already stolen. How
15.
Well, I want to talk about it, everybody, because there was a time when you bought land in Oklahoma, when you bought the land and you had the mineral rights for the land. Now that's no longer the case. But I'm wondering if when these black people bought this land, if they had mineral rights too. Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a couple of minutes. Okay, CK, we're going to pitch it to you, girly girl.
Hey, Miss CK.
She's on
Good
mute.
morning. Good morning. I'm sorry, I had you on mute. Good morning. Yeah, no, this is it's really incredible there. But as I think Mark said, as everyone said, actually, there's more than one Tulsa. But you have to start with one success story, one from a legal standpoint, because there's there's no question there should be reparations and restitution, but you have to be able to get through some court with a success story. And I think it's got to be accompanied by administrative action from the administration, from the U.S. government that was complicit in this years ago. And it also has to be accompanied by legislative action. So it can't just be in the courts. Just like anything else, any other fight, it's got to be on multiple levels for there to be a chance of success. I think it's a good start that the president went to Tulsa. That is a good start. That's a very good start because at least first president, I mean, just think about it, ever. We've had a couple other, President Clinton didn't go, as I understand, or previously, nor did President Obama. So it is a good start, and let's see where that takes us because we don't want it to just be ceremonial. First of all, there's nothing to celebrate. There's nothing to be all excited, hee hee ha ha about. This is one of the worst massacres that we've seen on U.S. soil. So I think it's going to be interesting. But the legal challenges people can't ignore what's going to have to happen in the courts because there have been many, many legal challenges that have been unsuccessful. But I think the case pending right now may have some traction. And I certainly would hope that in the lifetime of the sole survivor or one of the remaining survivors that she would see justice or they would see justice. But they have heirs. So it's not just them. It's their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, the entire community. But with litigation, you have to be very, very specific and be able to tie. Even when it's a class action of sorts, you've got to be able to tie, be specific on the damages. And that's accomplished by experts and all that kind of stuff, and having a strong legal team that takes the previous litigation, looks at some of the deficiencies, why the courts ruled a certain way, understanding that many of the courts, the judges are biased, and filling those holes and trying new theories. And of course, the political climate does matter. Who's on the bench does matter. Who's on the appellate court does matter. That's why, it's so important for this administration to be able to level the playing field based on the damage that was done in the previous administration by appointing over 300 minimally qualified federal judges on both on the federal bench and the Court of Appeals. So all of those things matter, but I think at least this is a good start. I'm not, jumping up and down and everything with what it means, because to me the proof is in the pudding. What's going to be done as a result?
Well, we're going to come back up. I want you to give that to the people because it's something for us to think about. Because these descendants, to me, when you think about multi-generational wealth, and we'll get into all of that when we get back, that's been taken from. Well, it's not been lost because other people are making the money, but it's been taken from these Black descendants, and that's something we really need to focus in on because this happened in so many places. Someone has asked me to get the names of the Tulsas. There's so many
15
Black communities.
How about Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia? How about Auburn Avenue? Just 10. Right home, right here. Auburn Avenue.
Well, I mean, in Wilmington, North Carolina.
5.
10 and a couple cities in Tennessee. The good thing about this very, very sad, disgusting.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and all over the country and all over the world. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's right, and WCPT 820. The Facebook page, that's right. And meet me over on Instagram, the Santita Jackson IG. That's my handle over there, Santita Jackson IG. And of course, Twitter at Santita J or at the Santita J Jackson Show, but at Santita J is really my Twitter handle. Want to hear from you. Want to talk with you about Tulsa, why it is resonating so deeply, and what the steps are going forward. We saw many descendants down there. Jonathan, I don't know. I didn't know that the Tools, who we went to school with them at Pershing when we were children, didn't know that they are cousins. They and John Rogers are cousins. I mean, their family owned the Stratford Hotel, and John Rogers has said that It was worth $125,000 when it was destroyed. You know, it actually survived the massacre. And when whites realized that it had survived the massacre, then the bomb was dropped on the Stratford. Wow. It would have been worth $100 million today. C.K. Hoffler. What about the right to return? These lands were stolen from these people. These businesses were taken from them. Is there a right to return? C.K. Hoffler.
Good morning, Santita. And I just have to say to Jonathan, to Santita, and to Rainbow Push, the Rainbow Push family that was there, thank you for being there and for doing all the extraordinary work on this massacre to bring to light and to promote people to move into an action plan to address this Tulsa massacre or this Greenwood District massacre and other Tulsa-like massacres throughout the country. And to Dwight and to Mark, good morning to you all as well. Yeah, there is, through litigation, I think there's three things that have to happen for people to see if they can be restored back. One is litigation. The only way that anyone can be restored back to lands that were stolen is through litigation. Now, there's a statute of limitations, which is a time frame within which you have to bring any claim. And maybe some claims weren't brought because maybe the system didn't allow people to bring claims, or the claims were dismissed, or there was theft, or for instance, the insurance companies didn't honor the claims. They should have honored the claims. There's so much that happened a long time ago, and there sometimes are evidentiary complications. But it starts with filing in the courts. We may not like it, but that's where it starts. That's why we have to be very careful about who we elect and who we put into office. Some judges are elected, and who we elect as the commander-in-chief, who has the ability to appoint or to try to get judges nominated to the federal bench, because these are the people who potentially will be hearing cases like this litigation that's pending right now relative to the massacre of the Greenwood District. So I think it's got to start with litigation. There are governmental actions that could take place. That's why I think it was very important, as a first step, for the President of the United States to travel to Tulsa. Very important. In support and in solidarity of those who were protesting and who were saying this has got to stop. He wasn't traveling like our previous president, wanting to travel just to congregate and have a campaign rally. He was traveling in solidarity. So that's a first step, but let's see what comes from that step. Because I think on an administration level, the Justice Department can play a vital role with litigation. The Justice Department can bring litigation based on investigations. They have investigative powers that are far broader, far deeper. And by the way, since the U.S. government was complicit in this, they may have records that we wouldn't have access to unless we go through litigation. Thirdly, congressional action. There have been pending measures before the U.S. Congress for a very, very long time. The debate on reparations is not new. I had the honor and pleasure of working with a group of just incredible lawyers led by none other than the great, one of the masterminds, best legal minds I've ever encountered, and that's Charles Ogletree. Professor Charles Ogletree led a team, Willie Gary, Johnny Cochran, Lorenzo Williams, many of us, I was working at the Gary firm at the time, were included in that litigation in 2003 to bring about reparations and restitution for what happened in the Greenwood District. That litigation ultimately was not successful based on statute of limitations grounds, meaning the timetable to bring the suit. That's what the court said. But we have to note that other groups have brought reparations type litigation, and the statute of limitations issue was somehow overcome. So we don't need to give up on this type of litigation, because as I said before, sometimes the first round you don't win, but you keep on fighting and ultimately you do. So we need to continue to push on a legislative front as well, with federal legislative front, and on a local level, statewide in Oklahoma. But finally, the people. The people, just as we saw the impact of people protesting together, black and white, are feeling some kind of way, walking together and saying, we've got to do something to bring about change. And in that community, they've been doing it for a long time, building the momentum, continuing the momentum with that would be very important. And then as we do that, just as with George Floyd's murder, brutal despicable murder, you get global attention and global support. And believe it or not, there is global pressure that can make a difference, just as it did with I believe, in the George Floyd matter. So yes, there is redress. Yes, it's going to be very difficult, but yes, it will not be impossible. And yes, the fight has to continue with that. But it can't be a one-time, thing where there's a lot of fanfare because we're marking the 100-year anniversary. There's no celebration, just marking 100 years of devastation. And it's got to continue on a level. There's got to be continuity, consistency, and people operating on 4 different levels, in my impression, for there to be ultimately an outcome, because it's not just about what happens in the court. We're in a political environment, and I think a good first step was taken by the president being there.
In America's business is business, CK. And I want to know, there was a time when you first bought land in Oklahoma where you owned the land and you owned the mineral rights as well. That is no longer the case. I'm wondering if when these people bought that land, if they have the mineral rights and if they were able to get restitution today, if they were able to have that restored to them, would they be able to get control of the mineral rights?
Well, I think that's an interesting legal question. And I think that's a question that's been looked at before, but that should be reexamined again, because there are things that the federal government can do. There could be federal enactments. There could be maybe presidential orders. There could be a lot of things perhaps that the federal government can do, investigations made, litigation begun about that very question. So, but there's got to be some type of document, an order, investigation that would be tied to the president doing something, the Justice Department doing something, or something happening in the courts. It's got to start with something. And I know in the past, people have investigated that. Remember, the Native American community there is in deplorable shape too. Oh, yeah. So there's a lot to be said about Oklahoma. And there's a lot to be said about congressional activity that could also make a difference. That's the power of the federal government. And then that's the power also of Oklahoma, the state itself. So we just have to be careful about who we elect and put in place people who are advocating the interests of justice, not just, other things. And this is a business thing. There are billions and billions and trillions of dollars tied up in this. And when people are losing something, it's not easy. One group is going to feel like they are losing, but we have to remember the descendants of those folks that helped and were complicit in the bombing and destruction of that community still live in that community. We just have to remember that. I'm not saying all people are bad or all people are good. We just have to look at the reality of who's living there today and the business and financial interest and not seeing a resolution. So it's going to take a collaborative effort, all the elements that I said, to get it done, because there are powerful forces that don't want to ever see a resolution. Those powerful forces could be the same ones that were, storming the Capitol and attempting a coup d'etat on, January 6th. So we just have to really look at all of the dynamics in this and be very careful with our strategy, but move on multiple fronts.
Jonathan, do you think it's important, the multi-generational wealth that was lost? Do you think that's an important issue?
Absolutely. Santita, and thank you, CK, my personal attorney as well. And this has to do with the complexity, yet the clear lines in this case to me. This is Cherokee Nation as settled law by the United States government, September 6, 1839. Then when the state of Oklahoma, only 114 years old, imposes itself on the Cherokee Nation's land. So Greenwood District is on Cherokee land. I think that's very important. And the McGurk case that was settled last year, I believe around November, by 5-4, a Supreme Court decision, acknowledged 7 million acres in the state of Oklahoma is Cherokee land. So it's multi-levels. So yes, there is a reparation. There is a acknowledgement of the Supreme Court's ruling, and there is restitution on a crime scene where you can trace back to what people have. Yes, you deserve the mineral rights. Can you believe that the Indians have reservations, which is quote unquote a designation of a territory, but there are really no rights in it. The rights of taxation, the rights of criminal law, the rights that were stolen from the mineral rights underneath the land. So the courts have given them the designation of the territory on a map, but not all the rights of the land underneath it. You have to get to it. And I am for reparations, let me be clear, but I also don't like wholesale justice on our community because we're not one stop shop, one solution fixes, works with us all. Some businesses need to have the cap removed so they can be over $1 billion. Some people need to get into business and may need $100 or $1,000. I don't think we should say there is one door that all Black businesses need to go through. That is a tactic for delay I've seen personally in business to say we're going to deal with all Black businesses. No, whites have businesses in mining and construction and telecommunications, and they're dealt with individually so you can speed up the process. I don't want to have one portal, one doorway to deal with all of our legal issues. Let's separate them and push them all through at the same time. We can deal with complex issues.
Was it significant that the Secretary of HUD, Marsha Fudge, was there? She came off the plane just behind the president, Jonathan.
Absolutely. And it was super duper significant that a young African American man, former Congressman Cedric Richmond, is advising the president and was on the plane. I must take my hat off to President Joe Biden for having some stand-up Black men around him. We cannot be afraid to have Black men around us to deal with our issues. That's a lot of integrity. Wherever Black folks are, we have a housing issue. We need the Secretary of HUD to go in multiple places at the same time. We have a housing burden. It's a huge housing burden. The wealth in Oklahoma, particularly in Tulsa, is on the south end, where the Oral Roberts universities and so forth. The Blacks and the Native Americans are pushed to the north end of town. Yes, they have a housing burden. And there are some parts of the Indian community where the houses still have dirt on the floor. So that was awesome. And it was great to see Ambassador Susan Rice there as well. In those front seats, President Biden had two African-American women and an African-American man. And not just any African-American man, a real man, a man that has integrity and stands up and fights for Black people in Cedric Richmond.
Dwight McKee, what do you see as the next steps? I mean, should we reframe? Should this be the beginning of the reframing of or should I say maybe adding something to the reparations conversation? What should the next steps be?
Well, it'll be hard to replicate Black Wall Street in Oklahoma because history is the byproduct of certain situations and unique circumstances. And it'll be very difficult to replicate those circumstances. You know, one is that they killed 300 people during that time, and they were basically the ones who really owned and ran those businesses. And they built highways and other structures on top of that. And so it'd be hard to replicate that. Like it'd be hard to take the Jews and replicate, pre-Holocaust Germany with them. So I think we have to be careful. And also on the issue of restoration, John, you have to look at how the Indians got there in the first place, the Creek got there in the first place, and that they would run out of Mississippi during the Jackson with the Trail of Tears. And they stole
Carolina all the way on.
Yeah, they stole 20 million acres from them in Mississippi. So you wouldn't just start in Oklahoma. You'd have to go back and get the land back in Mississippi that they ran the five civilized, quote unquote, civilized nations off of.
Let's start in Oklahoma. Let's just start in Oklahoma.
Really reparations. Last week, the Supreme Court confirmed that Johnson Johnson had to pay 20 people $2 billion for the situation that they had where the talcum powder caused cancer. 20 people, $2 billion. And so if 20 people are worth $2 billion for being inflicted with cancer, which is terrible, then imagine what these descendants are owed, not just by the government, but by the private sector who had benefited from the Holocaust. All of this should be set up, I think, Mark, in a package situation where there's a real transference of wealth and power, where the titles now you can't transfer the land, but you can transfer the titles to the land. You can't give the Indians back Manhattan, but you certainly can make those buildings pay a tax to them since they stole Ireland for $24 400 years ago. So if you transfer a title in mineral rights to the ancestors, I think they can go in the direction of some kind of compensation.
Well, I mean, Jonathan, you deal with money. Does that sound feasible?
Santita, it happens all of the time. The German government in the last month has acknowledged the genocide they created in Namibia and specifically in the Windhoek area of Namibia. And they've already committed $1 billion towards, if you will, reparations and restitution towards the people of Namibia. The United States has felt guilt for its participation in eugenics and displacement of and turning it back on the Jewish people. And they make an annual commitment of a minimum of $4 billion in direct financial aid to Israel. The United States has bombed Vietnam and has gone back to rebuild Vietnam in the last 40 years. The United States has gone back into Europe with a Marshall Plan. We can do the same thing at home. The Tuskegee Airmen said they wanted victory abroad and victory at home. We need to bring a victory home. And again, Santita, I've got to jump. I love you all. I love your show. We need justice at home. How insulting, how hurtful to live for 100 years. A witness to a murder and a crime scene has never had her day in court. It was great that President Obama had senior citizens almost 100 years old come and visit him, but they needed more than that. They needed the acknowledgement that President Biden did, and we need justice by having an active court case, to Attorney Hoffler's point, to make precedent. There's no precedent to settle this case. We have to first acknowledge it, what President Biden did, and now we have to make a precedent so we can open up the other cases.
Thank you, Jonathan. Blessings to you. And of course,
love you.
Love you very much. Love you very much. And yes, everybody, he is my baby brother. Yes, people are doubting that. He is. Is he not? Thank you. Dwight is living witness. He's known me since I was 2. That's right. And CK, you know this. Yes, he is. He is.
Yes. And he's brilliant and magnificent and wonderful. And Jonathan, thank you for all that you do. All that you do.
Bless his heart. Bless his heart. You know, Mark, I want to know, what do you think about all of this? I mean, what do we tell our children? Because it seems that, when you get down to Oklahoma, you see the, the indigenous community they have a lot of influence there. They're beginning to coalesce and pull their power together. And make some demands, make certain that this country begin to honor treaties that they have never, ever, ever honored. You see, Greenwood, the Greenwood Archer Pine section, destroyed. And then you see a white community, even a white working class community that lives so well, let alone some of the wealthiest Americans in the United States live in Oklahoma, live in Tulsa. Where do we go from here? How do we proceed forward in your estimation?
Well, one of the perks of white privilege is that you not only get to dominate everything, but you get to force everybody else within your proximity to participate in helping you to soothe your own conscience. And I think that that's part of what we really need to be careful about as we deal with this. There's a lot of guilt about this, and your brother mentioned, even the guilt that was felt by the white landowner about occupying First Nations territory. And the question was not posed to him about whether he would be willing to give it back, but it really should be. And I think that most people know that. They know that that is the big question that's looming out there. And in order to both calm their conscience and at the same time avoid taking responsibility for these great historical crimes, then great care is taken in devising what are supposedly remedies for these historical problems, which don't, in the end, do justice. Because it is, as I mentioned earlier, Tulsa is not isolated. This is something that happened, in more than 30 cities around the country. And it's not just this type of violence that was inflicted and imposed upon Black communities. There are countless massacres that were committed against First Nations people, frequently called American Indians. One of the worst of which was in Colorado at Sand Creek, where, John Shivington of the U.S. Cavalry led a raid on an Indian village that was occupied only by elders, women, and children. They massacred all of them, carved their body parts from their corpses, and attached them to their hats as trophies. I mean, and that's just an example of the horrific violence that's taken place. And when the reference was made to the fact that the territory occupied by the Cherokee, the Cree, and the other so-called civilized tribes was new territory. I mean, Mississippi was taken from them. Vast stretches of the Smoky Mountains in North Carolina were taken from the Cherokee. Vast, stretches of territory were taken from all of them. And for us to begin to honestly look at these crimes, what we reach is the inevitable conclusion that I reached a long time ago, in which people tell me I'm crazy for reaching, which is that the country, in order to do justice, must be dissolved. It must be dissolved in order to do justice to all of the people who have been harmed as a result of this enterprise. The territory has to be returned to the First Nations people. Reparations have to be paid to enslaved African people and their descendants for all of these things that were happened. These were not discrete, limited kinds of situations and crimes that were committed. They were committed against entire populations.
1 minute.
Who had no interest in the first place in participating in the United States of America as an enterprise, and certainly not as an empire. And so, to me, we just have to be honest. As painful as that is for many people, as much as it offends white privilege and the belief that they can live and benefit from these historical crimes and still, enjoy the fruits of all of those crimes, they can't have it both ways. Justice demands that a price be paid for all of the benefits that have been enjoyed as a result of the massive death, the historical crimes that have been committed against people over generations. You can't have it both ways. And I know it's painful.
15.
People don't want to face that reality, but that's the challenge that we have to face, and we have to accept it, embrace it, and move forward.
10.
Something new that is rooted in basic principles of justice
5.
for all humanity.
Everybody think about it. On Keep Up Alive this weekend, we're going to be talking about this 7 o'clock on Sunday. Meet me on the Santita Jackson and Friends page and over on iHeart. I love you, everybody. God bless you. Have a great weekend. I love you all so much. Thank you so much for being with us today. Wonderful conversation. And you all, of course, heard about the white veteran who was talking about the Black origins of Memorial Day, and his mic was cut while he was keynoting this military event. Can you believe it?
Wow.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Bernard Kempter was invited to speak as a keynote speaker in the at the Hudson American Legion Auxiliary in Hudson, Ohio. And he decided to focus on the holiday's origins in Charleston, South Carolina. Of course, newly emancipated African Americans saw that these white Union soldiers had been ignobly dumped in mass graves. That is the highest insult. That's what we saw at the end of Glory, when you saw the white and the blacks dumped in these mass graves at the end of that movie Glory. Well, they dug up the graves and buried them appropriately, and more than 10,000 of them, of newly emancipated African Americans, had a huge ceremony in Charleston. That is what started Memorial Day. He was speaking to that, and when he went down that road, they cut off his mic. Now, he sent his planned remarks, according to this news report, to organizers ahead of the gathering, and was asked by the American Legion Auxiliary to modify his speech. But because he had not been told that any topics were off limits, he went on with this. And he consulted with a town official about the black history. And just to be sure, and they cut him off when he started talking about black folks and the origins of we've got a lot of work to do, everybody. I just thought that was in my headlines today, but I thought I'd share that with you all once again. You all have some closing thoughts before we go?
Well, I have a closing thought.
Yes.
My closing thought is tied into Mark's thought. And I know that the reality says now that, these Europeans live on the land and they build up great buildings and monuments to themselves and their businesses on the land. And so it'll be hard to take them off of the land. But that's why I said, what you can do, Mark, is you can transfer titles so that now they lease the land, since it really is somebody else's land, and then they pay an annuity to the descendants of the people who they now have to lease the land from. So if you take a place like Manhattan, where they really stole the island, they say they bought it for $24, and you transfer a title back to the Iroquois and the natives who on the land, and now you have to pay a fee, your rent, to them. Then at some levels you begin to balance the equation, because now there's a real transfer of land, but you still have the benefits the white people do of usury, of you being able to utilize the land for your business purposes. You just pay a percentage now to the people that own the land. You pay a land tax because you really are leasing that land.
Mark, your response, and then
Yeah.
CK, you can close everything out for us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see the practicality of that, but for me, it's a matter of principle. And while I see that as practical, it's not my call.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a proposition that could be proposed, to the people, who the land was taken from, and maybe they'll say, yeah, that's a practical way of doing it. But if they don't, then I think that it's their prerogative. It's their decision about what's to happen with the land. And, people say, well, it would just be so, it would destabilize everything. It would be so disruptive, to try and relocate people and all of that. But they're just forgetting that Andrew Jackson went into, the Cherokee territory where people had established advanced and highly, well-established civilization there. They'd been there for as far back as anybody could remember, and he told them, pack up and leave. And so it's okay to make, the First Nations people pack up and leave behind everything. And we can't ask that of other people who actually did the stealing. There's something wrong with that. And, I think that it just falls to them to tell us what they're comfortable with. And certainly I don't want to give up my house, and my hope is that they would say you can stay, but it is their call.
Like you said, and not to mention the fact that, let us remember, our president, Andrew Jackson, was known as the Indian killer. Your closing thoughts? I was about to say, CK, your closing thoughts?
Santita, I think that, I look at, all the different levels that we have to fight on, but I'm also looking at, on the final analysis, we have to be realistic with some of the things that we can expect. I think that we can fight, we can get reparations, and we can get a level of restoration, but I don't personally feel that it is realistic to believe that we will be able to oust people from their homes, from their this, from their that, or destroy from the beginning and rebuild this nation, just completely destroy, dismantle, and rebuild it. I don't think that that's a realistic approach, in my humble impression. But what I do think is realistic and difficult, and all of this is going to be difficult, is continuing to fight in the courts and continuing to encourage. It was, again, I said before, a big step for the administration, for the president to show up in the way that he did, and focusing on also what are they prepared to do along with the current litigation, along with the grassroots and civil rights and human rights organizations nationally and globally, along with the citizens and those who have been the victims and most impacted. All of that collaboration together, I think we need to work in that direction, because I just don't feel that there's ever going to be a time, and I can't say that I advocate one way or the other for this, where we can completely dismantle the fabric of this country, start from scratch, as Mark was saying. Although I understand why he says it, I just don't think that that is a viable option. But I do think that there are other options that we can pursue that will get us to the same place that Mark wants to get to.
Well, you know what? I think we're gonna have to continue to have these discussions very quickly, Dwight. I've got a quick call. I've got to go into another meeting.
Well, I'm using my point of reference, Haiti and France. It's France forced Haiti to pay them a tax, a reparations tax for 150 years to compensate them for having the loss of slaves and land in Haiti. And it went directly from the Haitian economy right into the French economy. And so we can use that model, which was effective in terms of rebuilding France, even though it decimated Haiti. I think at least you got a point of reference based in law and in substance. That's my point of reference for this.
Well, we're going to continue to have these discussions in the coming days. I'm going to have Reverend Dr. William Barber on. I'm going to have John Rogers on. I want to talk this through because I think that Mark represents an absolutely morally sound and correct point of view. I think that legally and practically, when I say practically, because I think all morality, Mark, is practical. That having been said, we are where we are. So I hear you, CK, make sense. Mark, you make sense. Dwight, you make sense. Jonathan made sense. And we're just going to have to continue to have these discussions because guess what? Truth crushed to the earth rises. And we are living in a moment in which all of this truth that has been crushed down in the earth is sitting right up next to us, looking us in the eye. So we're going to have to work it out, everybody. I love you. We'll be talking about this on Reverend Jackson's show on the Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson radio show on Sunday from 7 to 9 Central Standard Time, 8 to 10 Eastern Standard Time. Can't wait to hear what the panel will talk about, how they will suss all of this out. It's going to be fantastic. In the meantime, I love you, love you, love you. I'm glad to be back with you. I'll see you on Sunday. Well, tomorrow on the Saturday Morning Forum at Rainbow Push. Go to rainbowpush.org. Go to the Impact Television Network. Sunday, of course, the Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson radio show. And then, of course, Monday, 6 a.m. right here on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless you, everybody. Thank you, Paul, for a great show. Love you, everybody. Love you, CK and Mark and Dwight. Love you, Morning Stars. And I love you, Nigel. Congratulations on your graduation, sweetie. All righty.